Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. It is a new week. We're going to dive into a new theme here, this one titled Comfort Music. There's not going to be a large, through line to all of this music. At least I'm not assuming there will be. It's quite possible that there is. What is comforting for someone might be not comforting for another. It's not going to be like Watery Vibes Week where we were seeing how watery music could sound. This could be all sorts of different types of comfort. For instance, today, we're looking at the band Boris. The track is called Angel. It is 18 minutes. It comes off of an album called Noise. Boris has never and probably will never be comfort music for me personally. But we're going to explore this track, and maybe at the end I'll come away with some sort of insight into why someone might find this comfortable. So, without further ado, let's get into this and see what Boris is bringing to the table today. It's interesting spending so much time with this one chord. You can really start to hear the imperfections of the tonality of each of these pitches. Sometimes when we play the four notes, they sound very stable together, and at other times there's slight friction to it. If nothing else, it tells me that it isn't a loop that was recorded once and copy pasted, but someone sitting there playing this very short lick over and over and over. I do respect the guts it takes to, at least for 5.5 minutes, do just one thing over here. No chord progression, 4 notes. did like that crossfade between the solo guitar into the vocals. vocal layers is neat. Ooh, cool bass line underneath all this. Interesting instrumental choice there. We did have a tambourine off on the left way earlier in this track. So this is like a series of muted bells all held together in a cluster. Just kind of... Actually, speaking of the tambourine, it's back. It's interesting how much of the back half of this track is a very alt-rock flavor. The guitar is large, it's massive. But the chords, the vocal style, the melody itself, the notes chosen, what order they're in, it's very like 90s alt-rock. Maybe at times a little dash of grunge thrown in. Due to the high reverb and the more optimistic sounds coming from this guitar over here, it's a wildly different vibe. Massive juxtaposition to the almost drowning in the weight of the guitar tone that we had heard for the previous, I don't know, 7 minutes almost. The reverb is becoming much here. Too much, maybe, even. It's starting to drown in the reverb. What was originally something that I posed as optimistic now feels overwhelming and piercing. Although I think I can attribute some of that to the production on this. There's some discomfort in the overtones that probably could have been diminished in the EQ of these guitars. This was an issue I had earlier in the reduction into the brighter section, where there was just a tone over here being held out that was fairly shrill, and it didn't have to be. Oh, this band. So we get 2.5 minutes of this. All right. I will certainly take this over Feedbacker, as well as some other Boris tracks I've heard that drift well into the realm of noise. I found this to be fairly palatable, if a bit slowly paced for me personally, but I would say that I enjoyed my ride through it. It is, as typical with Boris, very atmosphere based. That's not to say that it is lacking rhythmic or melodic qualities. It certainly has those, but it isn't quite focused on them, at least not all the time. And it does take its time. It is a patient track, and that is something I've come to appreciate and understand is a part of at least most of what I've heard from them. Maybe they have shorter tracks that have a brisker pace to them, but y'all just don't let me hear that kind of stuff. um I think with that said, this is the track that I've heard from them that I would be most willing to revisit. There are only a couple of places in here that brought me sonic discomfort, and they were mostly over and done with. I was going to say quickly, but maybe comparatively quickly to the rest of this track. Much of this is in 5 to 7 minute bursts, and these sections were 1 minute, sub 1 minute. So they were relatively short-lived on this track, even though they did hang around for a bit longer than I would have liked. And once again, it's very much an EQ thing. Boris tends to have a bit more of a raw production style, not totally raw where you can't understand what's being played, where the production muddies up the performance, but it's certainly one that doesn't feel quite as pristine or rounded off, less sharp as other bands would approach. And so we do occasionally get, and sometimes frequently get in some tracks, where Boris will play some notes or hang on to some tones or something like that, just really fixate on sounds that have very harsh overtones to them. And we did get that in two places here. But aside from that, I found this incredibly palatable and digestible and enjoyed myself, which is not a phrase I typically use when talking about Boris. Tempo plays a huge part in this. I'm going to be speaking specifically about time feel here, though, because tempo is malleable. You could say that a song is in 50 BPM or 100, and you would be right. It basically dictates where you would find the pulse, where someone who feels a song at 100 feels the pulse twice as often as someone who feels it at 50. That happens here too. For the first 7 minutes or so, the song is, as I felt it, at 37 BPM. But you could certainly argue that you felt it at 74, something a bit more moderate, less dragging. I found a pulse every 2 notes of the main guitar line over here, those 4 notes. Dun, 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 dun. You might feel a beat on all of those. Dun, 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 dun. I felt it slower than that. I felt it on every other note. This, I think, paired well with the large gap that sits next to it. To me, this was 1 bar. 2 beats for the 4 notes and then 2 beats of silence. And so through this lens, I felt this as something that was incredibly dragging, something that is just so slow. I mean, anything under 45-ish BPM is going to be a pretty slow pace. Once you get into the 30s, you really start to move into the realm of it's almost too slow to perform accurately. And this is what we've heard in funeral doom bands in the past, where everyone's supposed to come in on this one downbeat and it's like 33 BPM. And it's sort of a cluster of notes that happen around this second or second and a half because everyone has a slightly different feel. When you're playing something this slow, it helps to subdivide it, to feel it at double speed or triple speed so you can keep less space between your beats and feel them all more evenly inside. You can keep that metronome in your mind going a bit more smoother and consistent. But they did a pretty good job of keeping everything together. Makes me think they probably are subdividing it. Maybe they had a metronome going when they were recording this. I don't know. But to me, it feels incredibly slow. And the drums typically work within this too. The accented hits are where I felt the beats, the pulses. Sometimes the drummer would emphasize that 74 pulse, the 74 beats per minute, but that always felt like a double time feel to me, where a majority of this track felt like it was just so slow and dragging its feet. So around the 8, 9, 10 minute mark, somewhere in there, we had a pretty big boost. We pushed into something a bit more alt rock. I had brought this up in the reaction itself. I counted this to be about 86 BPM, which is huge. That's over double the 37. But it's only a little bit faster than that 74 if you're feeling that. And while to me it did feel like a massive lurch, it didn't feel wholly disjointed either. There is that connectivity because it's really only like 10 BPM faster than the double time of the original. And there were parts of this, as I mentioned, where the drummer might fill in double time too. So while it was a massive leap, I'm not going to say that it felt like we went from, 5 miles an hour to 100, but it was certainly a felt change. The penultimate section of this track, we did bring the speed back down a little bit. I think to me it felt in the 70s. I didn't actually check the BPM on this one. And we do wrap the song up back in the original tempo. To me, again, feeling at 37. So this song ramps up in tempo and then backs off. I feel like this lines up well with the emotional experience of this track too. We start off with just a single instrument, and honestly, it's kind of vague. We have 3 notes here. There's not a lot of emotional information you can get from that. 3 notes do create a triad, which is a 3-note chord. But again, we don't even know what key we're in. These 3 notes are parts of several keys. You need more information to understand what's being said here. And there's no progression here either. So we can't even pair a series of chords together to create an emotion. But I will say that eventually paired with the guitar and the slower tempo, it ends up feeling a bit more somber. It certainly is a distinct vibe versus the more optimistic component in the penultimate section of this track. It can be dreary at times, and I think when paired with the tempo, creates something that feels depressive, a weight pushed down upon the song so it can't progress at a rapid pace at all. It barely gets this whimper of a guitar over here to even kick the song off. The drums come in and they're incredibly quiet. For the longest time, we weren't anywhere near max volume on this track. It takes an enormous amount of energy just to produce the bare bones of a song, a chord. I find that to be interesting because once this guitar comes into the picture, it starts out rather slow too, but it ramps up. It carries the song. As this guitar's melody lines become faster, more complex, instead of holding notes out, we have fluidly moving melodic ideas. This influences the drummer to pick up ideas too. They begin to get a little bit more fancy. We introduce what is this instrument? The tambourine over here. Um, it comes in and it just adds a little bit of splash of color. The drum part becomes more intricate, not necessarily complex, but it's not just holding down the tempo anymore. This compounds back on the guitar over here. No, over there. And this guitar begins to play faster and louder. The volume rises. We start shifting to some 16th note picking and eventually even tremolo picking. It is all still, I would say, dreary atmospherically. There is a negative bend to it all. It feels still like an overwhelming grief, but well, we've got ourselves up off the floor and we started out walking, picking up the pace. There's energy here. It takes 7 minutes until this guitar changes to chords. And at this point in the track, we have these enormous guitar tones. I suppose this could be seen 2 different ways. The atmosphere being overbearing, trying to stop the momentum here could be this crushing sound The grief itself is palpable here, a physical presence, a weight that pushes down more so than we've ever felt prior, but it could also be the resistance to that, a want, maybe even a need to push through this depression. This rising intensity comes to a head around, well, like 12, 13 minutes in, and then we find catharsis, optimism, some sort of joy. We come out the other side of this back to thinness and beauty and positivity, which, at least for me, is short lived. As I mentioned during the reaction, these sounds are so drenched in reverb that they begin to overlap and cause feedback upon themselves. What started out as something that sounded beautiful and serene becomes anxiety inducing as the feedback loop creates this monstrous sound of overlapping tones full of dissonance and consonance simultaneously. It fades out and we're back to the beginning. I've been trying to figure out what this story represents. Could be simply the cycles of grief, something that I've talked about in the past. Grief isn't necessarily something you get through. They talk about, the 5 stages of it as if there's an end, but there isn't. It's a bit more cyclical than that. But I think it could be dealing with any sort of a burden, emotional or physical, but something that's a bit more perpetual, something that's a bit more cyclical. I don't know. There were words in here. Maybe the lyrics will give me some insight, but I find the lyrical side, or sorry, the vocal side of things to be rather interesting too, because the very first time we hear the human voice here, it is angelic. It's prior to the 7 minute mark when our little guitar over here switches to distorted chords. It's just these very thin, bright, high pitched oohs. No words, I don't think, just vocalizations. We hear a little bit of this towards the end of the track too. I admittedly don't remember the exact place they were, but this vocal component comes back after the alternative rock bit. I don't know if angelic would be the word I always use to describe that. I could simply be influenced by the title of this song. But I can't dismiss that there is something of levity to that, especially compared to the other vocal style that dominates a vast majority of the vocal work on this track, which is sort of gloomy. There's presence to it, but it also is a bit defeated. There's no heavy projection, there's no belting or compression, there's no sounds of strength here. It can be heard in the mix, but it's not particularly strong. The notes chosen also feel a bit moody. I had mentioned that this is very 90s alt rock with a splash of grunge, and I think the times that I would most often think that is when the vocals were present. When they weren't, it just kind of felt like very distorted, sort of in our artistic form of alternative rock. But when the vocals came in, I got a very grungy vibe to it. And I think a lot of that comes down to the moodiness of the vocal delivery and the pitches in the vocal melody. All of this, of course, compounds really well, but it really has those clean vocals, the higher pitched angelic ones standing in juxtaposition to pretty much everything around it. The heavy weight of the intro, the grunginess of what comes after it. It is this small moments of bliss, optimism. It does eventually get explored musically in the penultimate section, though once again that gets distorted and perverted as well into something anxious. It's little snippets of grace throughout this track. And I think that's going to wrap this up. It is ultimately 19 minutes of 4 sections. Like I mentioned earlier, each section is like 5 to 7 minutes in length. And they're also hyper repetitive, particularly on the harmonic and rhythmic side of things. It's the melodies that tend to evolve, though most of the melodic writing is finding different ways to explore a specific sound, a specific vibe or atmosphere. There is growth through them. We did discuss how this song, grows and falls, the general pacing of it. But honestly, aside from the size difference, the first minute of the song and the fifth minute of the song really aren't that different in execution. It's really about the story that's told through the subtle shift and metamorphosis of this track. Usually I'm talking for twice as long as the runtime of a track. Here it feels like I've spoken less than the length of it. But it is a song that is made up of a relatively small amount of ideas, just really stretched and expanded to their breaking points to fill out such a large amount of time. Let's hit some lyrics on this one. We'll see what's going on there. So I'm not entirely sure how accurate my reading of is this, particularly because some of these lines, they're a bit rough. Some of them just don't make any sense. I'm going to assume that this is due to translation. I don't know how this was translated. I found these lyrics on several sites. They all had the exact same lines, but I remember the song wasn't in English. But I have had a tough time tracking down even the original Japanese, I believe Boris is, lyrics to this track that I could even use an LLM to do some machine learning translation on. So I'm just stuck with these lyrics, however they came to be. I don't even know if they're accurate, to be completely honest. There are feelings within this, though, that absolutely match the vibes of the track. There is feeling of loss, of the difficulties of moving on. At one point, it says that the separation becomes maddening, that all there is a remembrance of a cold parting. Through this, however, I want to be healed. That right there, I think, is a beautiful encapsulation of this track. And I used the cycles of grief earlier when discussing my relationship to the sounds in this track. And yeah, I honestly think that that's what's going on here. At the beginning, it says, I'm frayed at the edges. The wound of your leaving is still seen. I'm trying to fill the emptiness. I love that right there. A metaphysical, not metaphysical, a figurative hole within this person that they're trying to fill back in, to replace with something that makes them feel complete again. This other person was such a large component of their life, a large aspect of it, that for them being gone, it feels as if a part of themselves has been torn out. It says words come together in pain. Yeah. Yeah, all of this points towards a specific vibe. Now, I will tell you, I am cherry picking lines here. As I mentioned, some of this stuff I don't think supports my perspective. Some of it also seems vaguely disconnected from everything else. I don't know how accurate or even how literal some of these lyrics are. There's possible some of the poetry got lost in translation. But he says at the end that sometimes I see the mimic of an angel, the facade of one, not an angel itself, but something attempting to appear as one. It says it does this to capture an innocence. And then this phrase I'm stuck on. How does mistaken fascination end? It's an evocative line. I'm struggling to tie it into everything else. Was this person not actually an aspect of this person's life? Were they fascinated with someone who actually had some distance from them? Or is this relationship to the false angel they saw earlier, the mimic of one? I don't know. The phrase mistaken fascination, though, is wild to me. It could imply that there was a falling out, that the fascination that they thought they had with this person wasn't real to begin with. Maybe it's talking about parasocial relationships. Maybe it's talking about an unhealthy relationship. This person, our narrator, felt more strongly for someone than they did for the narrator. They thought they were equally fascinated with each other. I don't know. It says, but I'll never miss a chance to share the feelings. I will never forget those feelings. Things get a little fuzzy with these final lines. I'm still not sure who this other person was, but regardless of how actually close they were, our narrator feels something missing with their disappearance and tries to come to terms with that, both the grief of the loss, but also trying to figure out what was there to begin with, possibly. It's an interesting topic to look at. The grief is pretty standard, but the other aspect, unless I'm misreading that, you don't see that too often. In film, sure, novels, unrequited love shows up all the time, but because of the singularity and brevity of music, it's just not a topic that comes up too often. And when it does, it's kind of put as a framing rather than something to fixate on like we have here. Something to actually question and bring into the topics explored. At least these are my thoughts on Boris's Angel. What did you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this track? Let me know. Put all of that as well as anything else you'd like to add into the comments section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.